It's the summer of 1989. A group of hikers from Leningrad, led by Pyotr Klochkov, sets out to conquer the Pamir Mountains. 32 years later, the fate of the 6 climbers remains a mystery. Let's try to solve it and dive into the events of the past to find out what really happened. The Pamir Mountains lie in the southern part of Central Asia, to the north of the Himalayas. They are stretched across 4 countries: Tajikistan, China, Afghanistan, and Pakistan, not belonging to any of them completely and seemingly towering over the geopolitical tensions of the region. Pyotr Klochkov's group started their hike in Dushanbe, the capital of the Tajik Soviet Socialist Republic, the 7th Republic in the USSR. The land was known across the whole Soviet Union for its natural resources, and conversely, their inaccessibility. Daunting mountains make up 93% of the country's territory, and the existing infrastructure is sparse, making it an exciting destination for mountain climbers. During the Soviet years, Tajikistan transformed from an almost completely illiterate country to a republic with developed systems of education, healthcare, and cultural establishments. Contrary to the atheism that was prevalent in the Soviet Union, Tajiks remained a pious people, their daily life guided by Islamic tradition. The attitude towards women, however, was different. They were allowed to get an education and participate in public life. And in the capital Dushanbe, you would see women wearing both traditional garb and modern European-style clothes. In the 80s, the spirit of the perestroika was in the air, and one could feel that great changes were soon to come. The Pamir Mountains attracted not only Soviet hikers, but adventurers from all over the world. Hidden in their forbidding slopes is beauty as well as ancient history. In the eastern Pamir lies the famed Shakti Grotto, where in 1958, archaeologists found rock art created in the early Neolithic period, at least 9,000 years BCE. These pictures, known as petroglyphs, show a hunt for wild boars, bears, and yaks. You can guess the outlines of human figures and arrows. This is the only piece of ancient rock art that has been found at an elevation of over 13,000 feet. The Pamir Mountains also fascinate with ancient legends of the peoples that once inhabited them, who worship the sun and the elemental forces. Pagan tradition is often found in Tajik legends. Local folklore is also similar to Arabic and Persian tales from the famed 1001 Nights collection. According to one legend, these mountains are inhabited by the one-eyed monster Ghoul, who confuses the steps of travelers, luring them into caves to their certain death. Other legends tell of female spirits that kidnap babies and take them away to the mountain peaks. If they ever return the children, they will have greatly aged. Another legend tells of a pond with clear blue water, hidden among the peaks of Karatag. If a traveler happens upon this place, they might start hearing female voices, coming as if out of nowhere. As far as mountaineering is concerned, occasionally even teenagers participate in hikes to the Pamir. However, the weather conditions in these parts can be harsh and the routes treacherous. It takes a lot of training to overcome these challenges if you want to experience the truly breathtaking views that the range has to offer. The most popular hiking destinations here are Lenin Peak at 23,406 feet or 7,134 meters. This mountain is considered the easiest to conquer of all the Pamir peaks, exceeding 7,000 meters. Communism Peak, 24,590 feet, and Mustaq Ata, possibly the most popular peak of the range. There are a lot of dangerous passes in the Pamir, and challenging them has been fatal for many brave climbers. Pyotr Klochkov and his teammates plan to start the active part of their route in the canyon of the river Muksu at the mountain village of Muk. Then followed a radial exit to the Shagazi Glacier, where they were to leave a food stash and return to the village. From there, they planned to reach the Belkando Pass, 11,000 feet, cross the Sugransu River, the Pamirs Glacier, and arrive at the Rigi Pass, 14,700 feet. Next in store for the hikers was the difficult Hadirj Pass, 17,400 feet, after which they were to move along the Shepak Glacier, traverse Shepak Peak at 6,000 feet, go through East Pamirs Pass at 17,400 feet, once again through Shepak Pass at 17,650 feet, exiting into Shinibini Gorge and returning from there to their starting point. This had to be done in no more than 24 days, till August the 7th. Even though the route never went higher than 20,000 feet, it was rated as a Category 5 for difficulty. What does that mean? Firstly, that the hikers had to get through a snow and ice-ridden landscape with an ascent angle of over 50 degrees, and very few helpful protrusions and footholds, meaning climbers had to create their own points of support, cutting out steps. Special attention was paid to the weight of the equipment, because attempting the ascent with a very heavy backpack was dangerous. To minimize their load and not carry everything they needed at the same time, groups would divide their supplies of food, fuel, and warm clothing into separate packages that they stashed along the way. This meant that the teams would only have a limited supply of food and clothing with them, designed to last for only a few days. The Leningrad hiking group of Pyotr Klochkov, who organized the ascent, consisted of 6 people: Pyotr himself, Irina Lebedeva, Leonid Lokshin, Olga Khurskovskaya, her husband Rostislav, and Yevgeny Vol. The 19-year-old Yevgeny took the place of a climber who at the last moment declined to take part in the hike. You could only embark on a Category 5 route if you had at least 6 people in your group, which meant that the hike could have been called off. Some sources say that Klochkov nearly begged for Yevgeny to join them. The Control and Rescue Service wasn't informed of the change. We don't know why no one seemed to be concerned that a group consisted of only 6 people, which is the minimum number of people required for such route, and also included the inexperienced Yevgeny, who had only gone on Category 2 routes, making the team vulnerable. The other participants did have a lot of experience, including with Category 5 routes, but could that fact really balance out the obvious mistakes in the choice of team members? We don't know if the hikers had any grim forebodings. However, Svetlana Inakina, an acquaintance of Olga Khurskovskaya, would recall many years later of her encounter with Olga before her flight to Dushanbe. Inyakina asked Olga if she and her husband had grown tired of mountaineering. Khurskovskaya gave an unexpected and prophetic answer.
"One last hike, and it'll be time to stop."
However that may be, Klochkov's group started their ascent in accordance with the initial schedule in the afternoon of July 14, 1989. From the mountain village of Muk, the group reached the side of the Shagazi Glacier. They left a fuel and food stash in a spot about a mile away from the toe of the glacier, and then went on to the village of Devshar, where they returned onto a path that would lead them to Belkando Pass. The group was ahead of schedule by about half a day. On the evening of July 18th, at around 4 p.m., the hikers reached Rigi Pass, where they left a note. Adventurers usually put such messages in a bottle or a jar and leave them somewhere that it'll be easily seen. In mountainous areas, these messages are a traditional way of recording the route, a way of saying hello and encouraging other people on the path. We don't know exactly where Klochkov's note was found, but in it, he points out that his team found the message of a group that had taken the same route last year. This could mean 2 things. Either the route Klochkov's team had taken was very unpopular if no one before them had found the message from last year, or that a more recent team was very good at hiding their notes. Against the first version speaks the fact that Klochkov's note was picked up in merely 11 days, on July 29th, by another team from Gorky, now known as Nizhny Novgorod. Nobody raised the alarm at that point, because the group had not yet run out. They were expected no later than on August 7th. When they hadn't returned by that date, the Leningrad Control and Rescue Service that Klochkov had registered his hike with sounded the alarm. By the late 80s, search and rescue teams were working quite well in the Soviet Union. Already on August 8th, helicopters joined the search effort, and on August 13th, experienced mountaineers that had volunteered to help arrived in the area where the group had presumably disappeared. 54 people took part in the operation. We must take into account, however, that they were searching not on a plain, but in the central Pamir, a mountainous region with an area of 125 square miles and some peaks reaching 20,000 feet. This complicated the operation. Of great importance for the search were copies of Klochkov's route book and information given by Yuri Vlasov, the man who at the last moment declined to participate in the ascent. We don't know exactly what he told the rescuers, but having been part of the team, he probably knew details of the route. On August 15th, the supplies stashed by Klochkov's group near the Shigazi Glacier were found. This discovery, however, did not please the search teams. The stash was untouched, meaning something bad happened to the hikers during the first part of their route about 2 weeks before the search started. Even if they were merely injured or for some other reason couldn't move along the route, the severe weather conditions would have probably already taken their lives. It remains unknown if the group left a second food stash, which could have been hidden on the right or left bank of the Sugransu River to supply the section of the route to the Shigazi Glacier. The hikers had little time and food to overcome the first part of the route, to the entrance of the Sugransu Gorge. We don't know what Pyotr Klochkov considered more important, having less weight on them or going a bit heavy but with a larger emergency food supply. This is something we'll never find out. Another thing that we will never know is how much food Klochkov and his group took with them for the whole trip. Perhaps their supplies were quite tight. The search for other stashes yielded nothing. The search for the 6 hikers lasted for a month, till September 9th. Both the rescuers and volunteers were exhausted, and their loss of concentration could lead to more victims. Any hope of finding the brave but reckless mountaineers was lost. They were apparently less fortunate than 2 other teams of climbers who were rescued during their search effort. The Pamir Mountains are breathtakingly beautiful and equally unpredictable. They do not forgive the mistakes and arrogance of inexperienced hikers, forever burying their souls under the snow. Nonetheless, there still remained the task of finding the bodies of the deceased and determining the reason for the demise. The search operation was postponed till the hiking season of 1990. In the meantime, the newspaper Sovietsky Sport and the magazine Tourist published articles about Klochkov's group. The Mountaineering Commission of the Hiking Federation of Leningrad, where the climbers had come from, contacted colleagues across the country in an attempt to find out if anybody had stumbled upon the group's tracks or belongings, or seen any weather phenomena that could give insight into what happened to Klochkov's team. By mail and by phone, they collected information from heads of hiking groups that had been in the search area around the time that Klochkov's team possibly met with an accident. Nothing was found, no things, no tracks, no evidence. It's as if they vanished into thin air, much to the misfortune of their friends and relatives who didn't even get to say goodbye. Now let's discuss different theories related to the death of hikers on the slopes of the Pamir. The Rigi Pass where Pyotr Klochkov's only note was found, preceded the group's ascent to the challenging Hadirsh Pass. Larisa Yevseva, an experienced hiker, trekked there in August of 1989 and recalled the ascent to Hadirsh Pass with terror. Frightened by the stories of the Leningrad group's demise, Larisa's group didn't change their route and reached this extreme point of the journey at dawn around 3 or 4 p.m. En route, they were practically drowning in snow. That's how challenging the path was. Another issue was the change in air pressure, which is always dangerous for mountaineers, and could have played a role in the Klochkov incident. Experts who investigated the Klochkov group incident tend to think that the tragedy occurred during the ascent to Hadirsh Pass, while crossing a ridge that was about 10,000 feet in height. They started the ascent no earlier than on July 20th. Tackling such a challenging pass at sunset is hopeless. In the nights of the 19th and 21st of July, the Institute of Physics of the Earth registered 2 small earthquakes, which may have caused an avalanche in the area where the hikers disappeared. It would have easily engulfed the group and carried them down into the abyss. This theory is supported by the fact that traces of a snowslide were found on the Vera Glacier, which lies near the pass. But excavating in such a mountainous area is nearly impossible, and whether the bodies are there still remains a mystery. The second theory suggests that Klochkov and his hikers got caught in a snowstorm with harsh winds while on the Hadirsh Ridge. Surviving the blinding snow and winds that knock you off your feet without making a single mistake or misstep is quite the challenge. It's reminiscent of what happened to the group of Elvira Shataeva on Lenin Peak. And we know that Klochkov's group was rather weak, and several members who were completely unprepared for such an ordeal. The Pamir does not forgive this sort of arrogance. If Klochkov's group fell from the ridge, the snow would have covered all of their tracks, and even the smallest bit of evidence would be impossible to find. However, no reliable data on the weather conditions in Hadirsh Pass between the 19th and 24th of July has been determined, though we know for a fact that there were snowstorms in the surrounding gorges, Sugrana, Shinibini, and Pamirs. Climbers often say that mountains don't like to keep the bodies of the dead to themselves, and that sooner or later they reappear to be seen by others. Whatever the reason for that, the magic of the mountains, or simply the melting of glaciers, we will continue hoping that someday the Klochkov group will be found. But for now, the mountains keep the dark mystery of what happened on those fateful July days, and for some reason do not wish to shed light on it.